Well, this is a mountain in the Pennines, which I can see out my bedroom window just about. Can you see? All right. I live
on my phone. I can see it.
Right. So this is. I wish I had some. I wish I had some elevation data, but this is about 1,100 feet above the Lancashire plain, and you can see this edifice here sticking up from like 30 miles away. Now I can see it. I'm just over here to the east of this object, and oh, sorry about all this. So I'm kind of
so presumably it's definitely not a garbage dump or anything, like a military base or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
It's certainly none of those things. And even if you look on the geological map, it's got an SD reference on there. If you can get it on Google Earth, because it'll give you an idea.
I gotta go help. I'll be right back. You guys keep going.
Right. In fact, I'll get this up on Google Earth, but it gives you an idea. This is all a plateau. This is all a plateau, about 1,000 feet.
Like a blister lift. When you get electrical discharge on the ground and it's physically lifted the center point.
Yeah, I think that as well. I think that as well. And if you look, oh shit, where have I got? Oh yeah, I've just zoomed out a little bit too much. But if you look, there's from the, I'm zoomed out a little too far. Bloody hell. I'm starting to go off. Where am I?
Just zoom in and in the center. It's come back out again a little bit. Right, from where your hand is, move down at a 45-degree angle to the west. Down. There it is. Where was it?
That's a different one. Oh shit! I'll come back to it. But where I can see this
before you move on, I wanted to know about archaeological excavations of that mountain. Have they been done?
Right. There's been a history of archaeological excavations done up here. Now the problem with this land is it's owned by Prince Charles. That's the first problem with it.
Weird how that happens.
The second problem is he's built a wind farm all over it.
Oh man!
And as you come down here, well, you'll it's called Crown Energy, and it's the biggest wind power energy corporation. Well, they have the biggest towers of anyone in the world, apparently. And so you can see these towers here. These are about 400 foot high. These towers are the biggest you can get, and they've dug it right through the ditch. Now this ditch up here, that's a mile long through solid rock. That's cut out of solid rock, a mile long, and it's dead straight, and it's full of water in the sometimes of the year. So you could actually use it as a canal. Now what he hasn't got wind farms on is quarrying. Hence these little missing bits all over the place, which you'll come to. See, all these are wind farms. This is the far end of the ditch feature. Now, like you said, this type of an old hill looks to me like an anode. Apart from when you get to have a real good look at it, you can see it's built on 1, 2, 3 layers of concentric heights. It's got streams going down past both sides, which could be considered defensive, I suppose. I don't know what all, and these are the field systems at the bottom, including a couple of pretty big dikes but I don't know how those old those are. Now this is meant to be different rock to all the rest of the land, and then when you come this way, you come this way. This is really more. These are ancient hills. These have all been mined out pre-Roman times.
What's the top elevation of the flat section? Is it around 900? Is it
probably
around
around 1,500 feet? I would think something like that.
1,500. Okay, so that's around the height for that a lot of the pilot knobs. They're usually in the 1,400 feet to 1,500 feet range.
Of the what? Sorry.
The pilot knobs. So we have two pilot knobs here in Kentucky, and there's a pilot knob in North Carolina, and they all have they're all generally conical. And then they have suddenly a raised, lifted section, and then they're flattish on the top.
Yeah. Well, these look like our up. Sorry, go on.
Was there a second structure to the east?
Is there a second structure?
The second one of these across to the east, because I saw it before you moved back. That there looked like there was a second one to the east.
Right. I'll go that way because it's interesting. Like you said, oh shit, here we go. I'm struggling with this Zoom here.
There's a plus and minus signs on the left-hand side of the screen.
Damn it. Oh, here we are. Get off. Right, so we're here
one
again.
there next.
Yeah, we're here.
Where your hand is.
Yeah, so this is the hill, and then if you look, oh, now all this is, they won't show you this because this is all the wind farm and quarry and what they're doing, but all this is a zigzag of kind of valleys. There's just lots and lots of really weird zigzags, and I live just where my hand is there, so I can.
It's reminiscent of some of the geological features around that Michael Steinbecker was talking about in the Rocky Mountains near, was it in Nevada? I think it is, Devil's Corner and a few other places. That the zigzagging arrangement. It was describing it as a wind deposit from above. So you got an electrical event that's causing a plasma constriction, and the rock basically rains because the wind is rotating. But the weird thing here is it looks like the wind isn't doing a circular thing; it's going in a line.
It is. It seems to be going east to west, and where this hand is here. All this rock is blasted away on the top of this hillside. It's all been completely fried. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, but is it what's the volcanic tufting stuff that they have?
Well, there's no volcanic. This is all sandstone. This is all what used to be granite has been recrushed from the cairngorms and reconstituted. And there's coal seam here, and right and below it all is a layer of limestone, and all this along here that's been scooped out. This has all been scooped out, and this is on a hillside. All this lot, and all this lot has been completely burnt. It's absolutely smashed and torched. All this.
So is it black rock or sandstone still?
Yeah, it's sandstone. It's millstone grit, but the beds have actually been fused, so they're really pretty. There's been a lot of quarrying going on, but the rock beds are actually what's left up here is just all bent and twisted stuff that you couldn't really build with. It's hard. It's got massive quartz in it, and see what they've done here is they've built these reservoirs, which they did in the American Civil War times when everyone was starving.
It looks like it's a very weathered and mined area.
Oh, it is.
So it could be, way older than Grand Canyon.
Yeah, I mean, they were mining here. They were mining in this part of Lancashire going back to prehistory, I think. This is where the coal seam actually erupts onto the hillside in many places, or it used to, and it was the first place commercially sold as a commercial coal mine. So the kids were in the pits in this area, and there's 6,000 miles of coal mine under this bit of land. 6,000 miles of it in just this little area of land. Coal
Sounds
mine.
like same sort of geological arrangement that occurs in the Sydney Basin. So you go to Newcastle in New South Wales and Wollongong and do a big circle around it, and underneath that whole area is just buried coal, basically, and above it is sandstone. I don't know what's below it.
Yeah.
But I know
well,
some of that area.
The coal seam here, it dips off at about 15 degrees and towards the west, so it gets deeper and deeper as it goes to the west, and by the time they're mining it in places like Wigan and the other side of Manchester, they're very, very deep pits down there. They're going down 4,000 feet. Well, they're just too dangerous to go down, but they're deep.
But that structure your hand was near just then,
Yeah.
looked like a double hit structure. There's two of them sitting side by side.
Oh, this one.
Zoom in. Yeah, zoom in a little bit. Oh, no, you've moved.
Oh, sorry. Oh, this. Oh, sorry, this one.
No, they were too close to each other. But you look at these things. There's nodules everywhere.
Yeah.
Raised areas, and that looks where you are right now. Looks like another machined from above result as well. This must have been scary stuff when it was happening.
Oh yeah, I mean there were thousands of people out working. I mean there were 3,000 men, working in the hill just above me. Really, that was full-time work for them up there. But this is where the industrial Pennines, the industrial revolution started, basically. But
so when you got your hand next, there's two lifted blisters there, and the one to the east is circular in the center, like a divot. The one where your hand is right now, is that a circular feature? No, not there, where it was, the top one.
That one?
No, the other one. Just above it is a circular hole. A depression. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's been a farm up there in the past. There's buildings on top of there. But
yeah, it looks like it.
Oh, I'm not sure where I am there.
Where your hand was. You got a little hand on the screen there.
Yeah, I'm just not sure where that is at the moment. I think I might be up Beck up there, I think, by the look of that. Now, I'm interested because someone's described features like this in Wales, and he's a hydro engineer, and he's saying, oh, now this is the top of the mine works where it's all been cut off, and I'm back to Knoll Hill. He reckons these structures are about 8,000 years old. All that's been found up here, there's been a few Mesolithic arrowheads found, but there's been no Mesolithic finds below 1,400 feet. Everything below that was covered in mud. Big covering of mud. So I think this particular feature is absolutely ancient. I think it's well pre-Roman.
I reckon you're going back to the last ice age, the Dryas period, if not before.
Yeah, it's a really old one. But we've had archaeological surveys up here, but they've been commissioned by Coronation Power, and so the guys actually there's stuff down here, all down here. There's Iron Age enclosures. I'll bet I could find some walls if I had a right good pick around down here. There's stone circles. There's there's ancient quarrying going on. Some of the stones just around here are absolutely enormous, and they look like they've been just sat up on top of the hill. Just here. And this bit of land here is called Prickshaw. Now, shaw means a wood, and prick is a points in all that in Anglo-Saxon. So these structures up here were known about even then, and they've put a big quarry up through here, and there's actually iron blooms up here. So that is, if there's iron blooms like that, those are definitely Iron Age blooms, because this is right on top of an hill. This is, I mean, you're about 1,600, 17 foot up on top of a hill here. And just up here, you've got a stone circle and a couple of burial cairns. I think that might be one of the burial cairns there.
Is there much in the way of caves in that area?
It's more mines than caves. Natural.
Were there caves?
Sorry?
Were there caves before the mines?
All the caving's done in the mines, because, like I said, there's thousands and thousands of miles of these mines around here, and some of them are pretty ancient. So there are caving groups around here, but they go down the mines, tend to go down these mine workings.
But in terms of natural caves, I was more interested in.
No, not at all around here. You'll get those in, well, you generally get those in limestone areas. There are some small caves that you could actually crawl in and shelter in, but nothing decent. If you go up 30, 40 miles north of here, you're back in limestone country, and there's plenty of occupied ancient caves up there, you know, prehistoric.
So there aren't any rocks sitting on top of, pillars anywhere in that area, are there?
Well, just where I've got my hand here now, I'll see if I can get a better zoom on some of these. No, I can't get any closer than that. But this is an old road. They suspect is a Roman road, and it goes, instead of going up the valley, it goes right along the top of the escarpment, all sort of like. And these roads up here, they stick to the top of the hills rather than in the valleys, because there's less climbing to do. There's up and down valleys all the time. All this lot is, all that lot's mining. All this lot is mined deep down. And this here is a really interesting structure. It's another, I believe it's another.
I'll be right back again, guys.
Ancient one, yeah, cool. And there's kind of legends of an old Brythonic place called Lake Caw, that was meant to be around here somewhere, where there was a big house, and they had carp farms, a carp farm. Now, you can't get a good idea of it from here, but if that goes across the valley and meets up there, you've got a bloody big lake just there. This is Dane's Wood, that's Doctor's Wood up there. This is an housing estate on the bottom of the valley.
It looks like it's a glacial valley there.
Yeah, but see, again, it's just that. It's just.
But right next to it is a very sharp V-shaped valley.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Oh, damn it. They are sharp V-shaped valleys. But they're much more small scale than, you'd expect sort of glacial features to be at. All this.
But the really thing that's got me is these angular shapes that are occurring, all like triangular shapes that are occurring all the way along the ridge lines, and it's very reminiscent of the area that was in Michael Schumer's, not Schumer's, Steinbecker's videos on thunderbolts when he was doing the geological expose of the tufting that had occurred.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen these chevron-like patterns.
Which
but yeah,
was blowing basically from the south heading to the north in a big line across this entire, which is where you're getting these weird results.
Yeah, this land here, it tilts to the south, and it's higher at the north, but significantly.
Yeah,
and that is some massive big flat plate with with a bubble on it, and it just sticks out like a sore thumb on top of this, and this is by no means higher than all this lot behind it. It's maybe 200 feet lower than this lot. But you can't see that lot from far away, and you can see that from Wales. So it's now this is a quarry here. This is a massive old stone quarry. Funnily enough, it's called Ding Quarry, and the dings were the old meeting places where the Vikings used to meet. They'd set a fire off, and that's where everyone used to have to come with their weapons, meet with the weapons, and get told where they're going to fight. And as you can see, it's been absolutely smashed to bits. This is about half a mile across, and all this stone's been absolutely. They just smashed. It looks like they've smashed all the archaeology to bits, wherever.
What's the stone that they're extracting? What sort of stone?
It's a very high silicate. They call it York stone, but it's actually the stone that they built London with, and it's the base for the Eiffel Tower. It's the most expensive is a very dense high silicate sandstone, and it's actually blue, and that is the creme de la creme when it comes to sculpting and all the rest of it. Now you won't see anyone up round here with any of it in the buildings because we can't afford it. But all that'll go to Italy or to rich people wherever they may be, But you can see the extent of the quarrying. They don't let you see it all, but they're actually just checking this mountain away. And this is called Scout Hill. You can't Shuttleworth is its old name, but it comes from being called Scout Hill. So these are connected forts, in my opinion.
Huh.
These are connected forts, and they carry right on. There's a Roman road. That's the Roman road where the motorway is, and this is the only way you can get north without getting cut to bits in these horrible little valleys. This is the only way they could get north through Lancashire, through this road. Here. And when you come just further up, when you come to the top of here, you're in the Big Eye Mountains then. But if you can get just to sort of around this area, you can get right over to Yorkshire, up this valley, which is the massive old invasion route. So in the times of King Arthur, this is the border of Elmet. And this side would be Reghead, but it was always a bit of a war zone where I live. Oh, they've left a couple of roads on for us. I don't know what bit of land that is.
Why have they blacked out all those areas?
Sorry, Robert, I can't hear you.
Why have they blacked out all those areas? There's huge quantities.
Owned by Prince Charles, it sounds like.
Yeah, they're either being mined or military sensitive, or they're owned by very, they just the places they've either got military stuff on them or they're being mined. or they've got plans. You know, they're going to do something with it, like mine a lot.
Well, it sounds like Tom Price. There was a mountain back in the 60s, and now it's just a hole. They've actually
Yeah.
dug, and that's just from iron ore.
Yeah, they're fairly subtle about it. They'll just leave the front face of the hill on and take everything else from behind it, you know.
Yeah, same thing
But
in forests back east.
yeah, but I'm definitely going to have a good look at these two, because, and then you can go straight up to that from there. You know, you can jump, and there's a line of them along here.
They're just above, in towards the center at the bottom. There's a node, that is the node you were talking about. But if you go straight up, there's another one at the probably at the top of the screen, just about short.
Yeah, that's the Irwell Valley. That comes down and that goes to Manchester.
Another
So
peak happening in the center, straight up to slightly to the east, above the valley where your hand is.
yeah,
You got a nodule down the bottom and another one almost to the top, but there's like three of them close together. It's almost like, I don't know, it's a weird formation. If this is caused but with the electrical uplift effects and just rock raining from above, it looks like a fair bit of rock was created, but it's a lot of etching that's going on.
yeah.
Very,
Look at all this one, a round one here. That's quite a weird one.
but it's like it's been an old structure that's very badly eroded over time.
Oh
So
yeah,
this
yeah.
should have to be ancient. Has there been any dating on any of the rocks? Anybody tried to do that sort of stuff, or have they kept it all quiet?
It's absolutely terrible, because it's just the only after right when Prince Charles wanted to put more wind farms up, he had to get a safety report done. And all this side of the moor where he hasn't got wind farms, is because it's too heavily mined and they can't support a wind farm. They can't support one of the towers. And so that was a failure for him. Now the archaeologist who got up there again, he spent all his budget from the University of Manchester looking at the Roman fort up at Stack's Castleshaw, which is like 10 miles to the southeast of us. And so all the budget for all the archaeology went onto that fort. And it's not even a decent fort. But all these are Mesolithic. And there's napping sites up here. You can almost see where they drive the animals into a place where they can get them, with a kill zone almost. You can almost see it. But it's like you said, there's so much industry gone on over the years around here. So even that flat hill up there, there's just lots of these strange flat hills. This place here is called Warlands. This is Brown Wardle, which is missing off here. Middle Hill, Hades Hill. Oh, that's Brown Wardle, Middle Hill, Hades. So there were battles fought around here, but I don't know which ones. Yeah, so anyway, that's a tour of my little place.
Yeah, your own little slice of research heaven.
Yeah. I'm sorry to have to put you guys through it. Someone had to get it at some point.
Not at all. That was great. I mean, it's not that we're trying to do any kind of major show or content around here, but I mean that's really good material for us to focus on. It's always good to cover new ground, anyhow.
But the interesting thing is the similarities in the landforms, even though they blacked out half of it. the similarity in the landforms compared to the area that Michael Steinbecker was describing in his geological reports. You've got these arrow-shaped landforms that rise to the north, which is the deposition. You've got a wind blowing with rock, hot molten, semi-molten rock rolling down on the ground. It's being, dug out of places for sure.
Do you have a copy of his papers, by the way, or any of his reports?
On YouTube, on the Thunderbolts channel YouTube.
No, I mean the paper versions, not his video journal.
I don't have any of his stuff,
okay.
but he has
references
to it. But he was trying to get the geological groups out there to recognise that there weren't any volcanoes in the area. You got igneous rock being deposited on top of limestone, sandstone, and deposits that are basically sea, or sedimentary deposits, which is really weird. It'd be interesting looking at the oil deposits where in Saudi Arabia and places like that where the sand has just been dumped on. Well, I'm just wondering whether some of these stories where they talk about rivers of fire suspending from the sky, and if it was oil or petroleum hydrocarbon stuff, if it got deposited and then a huge dump of sand occurred on top of it, you'd get all these doming effects that go on. It's just, I had some very serious arguments with my colleague, like at the top of our voices at each other about how wrong we were. And I'm saying that these formations that we're talking about don't have to occur as a under the ground formation that suddenly gets uplifted. They can rain down from above. All you need is the environment to produce the sort of material that we see. So I think a lot of our geology is a bit wonky, but you can't blame the guys in the 1800s and the 1700s that were trying to explain all this sort of stuff. You got the idea that the world was only 4,000 or 6,600 years old, and they're trying to explain what they see according to the Bible's literal truth, and it wasn't working too well for them.
Well, how ironic that I was just writing about making theories before having facts just a little bit ago.
Yeah, well, it's you got to look at the evidence, and which is one of the reasons why I see we've got to go back to these older ideas and apply the current evidence to them and see where they still stand up.
100%.
And we're finding even in electromagnetics, which is supposedly well understood, there's still room to actually go after the fundamental assumptions that everybody's working on.
Well, no, I completely agree on that. The whole reason for creating the main reason for creating a PIM cosmology is to bring unification, but the secondary reason is, well, to go back and fix because the chronology, that's what I was writing about this morning, is that the chronology was unfortunately not actually ideally evolved. It was very hodgepodge, and so you get understanding before you have understanding in certain areas.
Yeah.
And spectroscopy came too early. It would have been ideal if we already had some kind of working atomic theory. We didn't. That's just the facts.
Well, that's true, but the simple fact is, though, that the assumptions, say for radioactive style dating methods, is reliant on the fact that the world hasn't suffered a nuclear or nuclear-like discharge ever in its past, and that
there's dozens of those kinds of problems, dozens of them. By the time
when you get these sorts of events that we're talking about, whether they're nuclear weapons or lightning bolt destruction, which will cause nuclear fusion and fission to occur, Your assumption that the environment radioactively hasn't changed over the time period you're looking at is out the door.
Yeah.
And with me and my colleague, old Roy, which we finally tracked him down tonight. He disappeared for a day. Anyway, we were talking about, how old is the human race, our species? And I said to Roy, I suspect that if we take seriously the claims of the Dogon that the human race came from Sirius, or part of the human race came from Sirius, the human race could be 4.5 billion years old as a species, and we would have had other hominid style, well, relatives, as it were, that could be old, and disasters of the sorts we're talking about wipe them out, and we're the ones that happen to survive. But I think a lot of our dating is just made up fiction.
I do as well. I mean, we're not even going with the archaeological record, though. The archaeological record seems to be following numismatics more than anything else, and that is completely messed up. I mean, why no one's put these through a proper artificial intelligence database, and to analyze. So, some of the artwork's just like completely out by 500 years on some of these coins. So, and that's what's messing all our history up. And not only that, but certain royal people having to prove that their great thingy was a big cheese in 800 AD, 500 AD or something, and they'd rather just destroy history.
The current lot, all the way back to Henry the VII, I think it is. All that lot, that descendancy line, is actually looks like it could be an illegitimate, I think it was one of before Henry VIII. I forget who it was, but the guy was not the product of a marriage. He was a
it was Henry Tudor. Yeah, it was Henry Tudor,
and he changed the history to make it.
Yes,
like
he did.
the right
But it's also, you see, I find it also coincidental that Theodoric and Theodosius, and especially Theodoric, keep showing up both as a Byzantine emperor and an ancient British king, and this Theodosius keeps popping up all over the place, and being part of the Tudor as well. I suspect he's got something to do with it, and it seems to me that when the British kings got kicked out, but after that Saxon War, they circled back down to Western France, Brittany, Normandy, got an hell of a big army together, the old kings, and come back and essentially claimed what they said was the land 500 years ago, and I think that's what the Norman conquest was.
My ancestors came from Normandy into Britain, and the family is around York, so we were sitting between the Scots and the English, beating the crap out of the Scots for a long period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, York.
I
mean, my place would be part of York. I mean, I'd be in the Diocese of York back in the day, although closer to Chester, very much culturally closer to York, because of course it was lost to the Danes, for 500 years. After, so. The idea that Saxons or Normans were ever in the north of England is just pretty well preposterous. I mean, there were Brythonic kings, yeah, and
Celtic culture from the British Isles to Ireland across into Germany.
Well, again, the origins of the Celts is under question as not being one race, but a kind of a made up tartan wearing group of people. The actual British, like the Brythonic language is much older than Celtic, which is spoken in Scotland and bits of Ireland now.
But I think that the
Yeah, it's much older language, but
But you've also got Pict, which is in Scotland, of course, and nobody really knows how to speak that.
yeah, sorry, I'm losing you again. I can't hardly hear there, Robert. But yeah, the Picts were a fairly late arrival. This is suppose maybe only just slightly earlier than the Romans, and apparently they did a deal with the Irish at the time, and that's why. Well, my mate says that's why they had to get tattoos to show that they were Picts, and they were that. That's what he said anyway. The Irish gave them women to sort of marry, which was very brotherly of them, I must admit. But I don't know what they got in return.
Well, the Irish seem to pick the losing side every time.
I think they originally came from the same sort of same bit of Turkey or Asia at the time, you know. I think they came from.
There could well have been a thriving civilization, a culture around here that got wiped out by a natural disaster, and they ally themselves with guys around them to protect themselves.
Yeah, I think between war and natural disaster, just basically, yeah, it all got completely blended up and mixed up the history. But I think it was a combination of the both.
But you've had since the time, since Roman times, effectively a total bastardization of any history at all. It's twisted and lied about and mallied around to make it so that the current group of aristocrats that lorded over everybody got justification for what they.
Well, that's right, and in this country they won't. They refuse to set archaeologists on anything that isn't Roman, or isn't, it's got to fit in with what, they'll spend millions on a site that's proven Roman, but it's obvious that there aren't any Roman sites up near me. They just, there might be there might be two. We find coins, but no Roman buildings. I mean, it's just a noticeable lack of
which all fits
Roman.
in with the Wilson Blackett theory that it wasn't the Romans that were there; it was that there was commerce between the Romans and Logris. The locals. They had imported, and in exchange, they would set about kind of undermining Glamorgan and Gwent's power, which suited them fine because the entire setup was actually all a bunch of city states.
Yeah, they were simply doing mining deals. I mean, in my part of the country, the Romans were purely interested in the lead.
Right.
Lead silver,
conquest was pointless at that point.
Yeah,
but conquer by culture.
Well, they already had 5 legions in Britain, and they were still getting their asses kicked. And it was, how much is it worth to? How many troops is it worth to get a bit of lead out of some mountains? And that I don't think you'd have to get people to cooperate. I think the only way you could get them to, well, I suppose if they were starving enough, you might get slaves knocking about, but they won't be in good condition.
If you can get an upstart little prince to, who's in what's now England, who really feels no personal alliance. He's got distant family relations with the families in Wales and the old Glamorgan. What's he care if he sells out and begins doing an economic alliance with the Romans?
Exactly.
Sounds like.
And so we see the Roman structures, but not really, permanent structures. They're just kind of outposts.
Yeah, that's it. They weren't spending money here; they were just exploiting it.
Right.
It's a bit
Exactly.
like how the
Smart.
controlled with their maharajas and all that rest of it. You know, pay some local despot to keep control and give the appearance that you control the country. And all you need is the occasional fight just in case there's a breakout and you deal with it. It looks like Britain was, you know, Romans India at the time.
I'm sure, but it's exactly like Ramon just said. You just need the guy who, fancy £1,000,000
Right.
Queen County man do it. Yeah, well, you have that land. Take whoever's on it. They'll get digging for you. You give me the loot. And
If even Arthur II's nephew Mordred gets uppity when he just crosses and goes over to Normandy, how much easier would it be to corrupt somebody who really may never have even had a conference with you? I mean, they weren't having family reunions here, and they're in the south of England, and they've got their own business, they got their own concerns, their own worries. They're getting Germanic tribes. They're intermingling. They're marrying. Alliances are shifting. They have to deal with Vikings. I mean, they don't have time for high politics of the courts of Glamorgan and Gwent.
no,
So, I mean, it makes total sense that they would become susceptible, and who doesn't want to have Roman style living? You got roads, you got palatial homes, you've got Roman clothes.
You got in-house sewage and water.
Yeah,
hot water too.
Pretty soon, you're rivaling power with Glamorgan and Gwent, and you don't have to kowtow to them anymore.
And the Romans to send in 20 legions instead of 4. So, great for the Romans, not so great for anybody else, though.
Right. Now, what interests me is how all those kinds of embattlings enabled. What was it? The Visigoths? I can't remember. Or was it the
Visigoths?
Visigoths. Somebody invaded the center of England. There, just went right up. Right up to the near to where the Scotland is, and established a little kingdom, and nothing could be done about it because of the way everybody was distracted with infighting.
That were the Vandals.
Well, Vandals.
That was the Mercians. That was the Vandals who became Mercians. They lived in the centre of England. They even had sort of Muslim coinage at the time, 7th century.
Yeah,
maybe 8th century.
And the solution in Wales was, let's just keep naming these kids Arthur, so they get the Arthur the Fourth, and it's just not working.
Yeah, sure.
Turn it on.
Sure.
Did you turn it on and off again?
A couple hundred years later and ruin the entire story for everybody, because they set up colonies around York and on the other side of Britain, and then in Ireland, Dublin was a Viking colony. It's sort of like power games, basically. Colonization in Europe.
Yeah. It must have been fascinating, but I mean, who's who? There was a real melting pot going on in this part. There was some hell of a melting pot going on.
Well, you can see the effect in the language. It's like English is the most bastardized language that you have.
Yeah.
So badly bastardized that they got rid of the feminine and male and neuter endings on words, and you got double words for various things depending on who the ruling powers, like pork and pig and things like that. It's like Saxon words unless it was cuts that the royalty ate, in which case it got French words. So,
yeah.
Then you got Danish and Dutch and Norse words in there as well. So then you got the Celtic and Saxon stuff as well. So it's like a real hodgepodge.
It sure is. Well, I guess it. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think as long as we know, I mean, it doesn't matter which ones we are particularly, or which ones we think we are, because we are obviously genetically so similar now after a million kind of iterations. Where the people of European origin are pretty well similar. I suppose
You're only talking 30 generations. It's
Yeah,
three
that's
generations.
for 1,000 years.
Yeah,
That's
well,
1,000 years.
every
30
100 years, it's
generations.
3 or 4 generations. So over 1,000, you're talking 30 to 40 generations.
Oh shoot, back then, 100 years is 5 to 6 generations because people were getting married in their, when they're 11 and 12 years old.
But they weren't making it much past 45. So yeah.
Exactly.
Well, how many grandparents would you have at that time, though? 2 to the 30.
I
What's
reckon
that,
you'd be
maybe
lucky to have
8,000,
any
something like that?
grandparents. You got high
8,000
mortality
grandparents.
You got high mortality rates for kids and for adults. Because if you're doing manual labor, you're not going to make it past 45 to 50. Anybody older than that was ancient as far as the local.
Do you reckon a lot of our social problems now is that we have people living very long periods of time, so we're not able to evolve or anything like that? I mean, I don't know.
Partially. I mean, it's more the case that kids don't die when they're 5 years old. You go back 100 years ago, and the number of kids that wouldn't make it is just staggering. You'd have families that had 10 kids in it, and only 2 or 3 have survived.
People took life in reality a lot more seriously at that time than they are now. That's for sure.
And it was a harder life too. So
yeah, people got older quicker. I mean, at 60-year-old, you're a pretty old man. Even in my grandpa's time, you definitely got a stoop on your back by the time you're 60. But now people are lasting, they don't look that way till they're about 70 odd now,
It's like my mum, she's 85 and in hospital, gone through a whole battery of tests. They think that she might have had emphysema and all the rest of it and worried about asbestos. But if she'd had emphysema, she would have been due to smoking, not bloody asbestos. But after all her checks and balances, no, your lungs are fine, your brain's fine and all the rest, but we're just worried about the ovaries and the uterus, and you might have cancer, but it looks like you've got cancer. We're going to have to do a bit more investigation. But 85, it's not a bad time frame. But her mother almost it was 3 months shy of 100. So, and her dad made it 75 when he got killed with strokes. That's on his side. But on the other side, my grandfather was born in Ripon, which has got bombed out of existence during the Second World War. But he only made it to 63, I think it was. And he was a coal miner, so he died of black lung.
Yeah.
And his
the
wife,
women tend to live a bit longer.
And she was a smoker all her life. And so, yeah, that was what had got her. But, you go back to the stuff, people who were born from the 1900s to about the 1950s, pretty tough group, They live long lives, really, in comparison to what went before.
Yeah. Well, as long as they're happy lives, that's the main thing. I think that's the main thing. Try and keep a happy life.
Look at Philip and the Queen. They made it to a fairly ripe old age compared to the Queen's parents. George V and Victoria.
Yeah. Well, there's millions that spend anything to keep them alive now, then, won't they? And
yeah, but they've had the huge benefit of looking after themselves for a long time. I mean, I'm pretty sure Elizabeth has been keeping her progeny and their children under tight wraps as far as what they eat.
yeah. I mean, having the best of food and having the best of care has got to help put a bit of time on your life. It's got to do, hasn't it? I think those people who just get in pain, I think it ends up taking years off them, So it's horses for courses, I think. See, it's a bit of a lottery, really, isn't it? I'm glad I haven't got my pension on it, but yeah, yeah, that's the one.
There's a local here where I live. She's a woman, comes from Rhodesia, was in Rhodesia, but she got an acupuncture at one point, and the needles kept popping out. They'd put the needles in, they just fly back out of her body. And before this incident, she never got sick with the flu or anything like that. Anyway, the acupuncturist got pissed off with these needles and brought out a battery, a car battery, and zapped her. And after that event, she reckons she was always getting the cold and the flu. So, Ramon, the question I've got is, it's not part of acupuncture to actually get an electrical circuit and zap the body with it directly, is there?
Did you say it was a car battery?
Yeah, 12-volt car battery.
Yeah, that's quackery. So when we use electricity, we use millivolts, like microstem, like small current. You're saying
you've not had people that you stick the needle in, it just pops straight out.
Well, no, that does happen. That's a person whose liver and just their liver chi is really up high, and it's insulting the metal phase, and so the electricity is now circulating through the fascia so strongly that defensive energy is now in charge and is pushing out anything that penetrates it. And I had a needle when I first got a needle in the ear. It jumped out of the ear so fast that my wife heard it because it made a pling sound as it jumped out, and it leapt a couple of feet. I was a pretty intense guy back then, so that does happen. But what you don't do is hook up 12-volt batteries or anything that's running, amps between, because you're going to destroy the tissue. Period.
So that survey you did that include the guys that have problems with needles like that, or did you leave them out?
If they're getting acupuncture from me, even if they have problems with needles, they're still getting needles. So I don't know.
No, I was just wondering whether any of the people that you did the survey included that group.
I don't know. I guess I'm not understanding your question.
Well, okay, you put the needles in these guys and they all pop out and all the rest of it. And the stuff you were talking about this morning with your pain threshold measures and all the rest of it, were any of the group that whose bodies rejected the needles in the group that was surveyed for their pain?
Nobody's body was rejecting needles. It's just a natural mechanism for the body to generally try to push out splinters, but it also will absorb the needles too. I've had people's bodies swallow the needles right up to the head of the needle.
Well, it's got to be electric. It's got to be electromagnetic in the response. I mean,
yeah, that's the point of the charge distributive network. So it's actually the circuit is moderating and modulating itself according to the signal that it's receiving. If it has a bad signal, then it'll seek a way to increase the source voltage and the output current. And if it's has too much, then it'll want to increase transformation out. And if you help it by draining from the load side, it will love that, and it will try to keep it.
Well, the question I have is, does in these events do they change metabolic behavior, like formations of various stuff? The reason why I ask it is because I think chemical reactions are the result of neutron formations. So what you got is an electron from one atom and a proton from another atom and a photon get involved. They create a neutron, and then it disappears, and you've got a chemical bond in its place. And when we talk about electrons being kicked up in energy and all the rest of it, I think it's the neutron absorbs the photon and then expresses an electron at a higher energy, and the electron that's at a lower energy just gets absorbed back into the nucleus. And what we think is going on in terms of these atomic absorption and emission processes it's not the electron that's absorbing the energy, it's the neutron. And the neutron wants to go stable, so it kicks out the too much energy electron, and drags in the one that's, you know, much more aligned to the stable state it wants to achieve. And what you see in the observation is you see an electron that jumps from one orbital position to another and then falls back emitting photons and all the rest of it. You know, if it's actually the electrons being absorbed by protons and photons are involved and being re-emitted, the process of what we talk about chemically in this process, and we've got nuclear fusion and fission going on in biological process as well, that you're trying to get to a stable point. And are we misinterpreting what we observe? You know, is a chemical reaction actually a nuclear reaction? It's just a low energy release system.
I mean, maybe. I don't have any answers for you right at this moment.
Well, that's something what me and Roy have been discussing, and he's you know he's done a lot of weird research really, and he says, well, the explanation I was giving, which made his research results look like they made sense, like he couldn't explain it any other way until I started asking him, you know, if we take this approach, does it change your view on what you observed? And because he's working in, you know, restricted material, I'm not privy to some of the stuff that he's been doing, but I was describing how some of these functions should occur. And you get I know I got it right when I look at his face and there's an expression of total surprise that I've, you know, cottoned on to something. And he's been given permission to discuss these things to me if I figure it out. Which is curious because, you know, I still think he's talking to his old work groups, even though he says he isn't. I'm sure he is, or we're being watched, one of the two. But there's a lot of stuff that if we understand what the dynamic actually is, a lot of stuff suddenly starts to make sense. And one of these things that there was the report that I got is they were doing an astronomical observation, and out somewhere in the Oort cloud, or, you know, between Jupiter, Pluto and the edge of the solar system, there's this huge flash of light. Anyway, one of the guys in the group says, "Oh, that's evidence of dark matter. That's a dark matter reaction." I was going, what? It could be an electrical strike. It could be an asteroid hitting another asteroid in a discharge, and you get a flash of light. You know, this idea that it's got to be dark matter, you know, where does that come from? What proof do you have that what you're saying is even possible? And these are guys that are working on, you know, bleeding edge technology, and they got bullshit ideas behind them. And then everything's a big surprise. You know, if you have the right sort of implosion mechanism, like let's say you've got unstable uranium that drops into a waterbed, and it's in a runaway effect where it's just trying to grab what you've got is you've got a system that's trying to maintain its stability in its current unstable state. So it drags from its environment whatever it needs to maintain that state until the energy gives up, and then suddenly you get a bang. And he was talking about, you did something to a uranium pellet and dropped it in a well, and it caused a fairly decent explosion. You know, earthquake 4, I think it was, on the Richter scale. He was describing how the land was jumping up and down like ocean waves, and I said, well, get the guys to go away and do a core sample, and you'll find that you've got a porous rock that has no water in it. And they did the drill, and that's exactly what they found. Somehow this lump of uranium caused a fusion event where the water got transformed into other stuff and sucked out of the environment. And the environment's very good at absorbing energy releases of this sort. You know, nuclear bomb, the bigger you make it, it doesn't do as much damage as you would expect. You know, make the bomb twice the size, but you don't cause double the effect that you would expect normally. And I think that's because the environment is absorbing the excess energy and transforming the material in ways that we don't recognize.
I'm listening. I'm doing work at the same time.
It's like the film The Day the Earth Caught Fire, which is black and white, where they do they detonate a nuclear weapon up in the ionosphere, and it you know, basically turns the Earth into a star because it, you know, you've got nuclear fusion, plasma fusion happening in the ionosphere, and it's cooking the Earth underneath, and it did a polar shift and a few other bits and pieces. So and then they thought, well, maybe we can blow it out like we do an oil fire and detonate another nuke up there and hope it just blows out the plasma fusion process that's running. But, you know, and then you had the same sort of idea with the Nautilus submarine. It was in color. It was done by the Americans. And you begin to wonder, you know, why these films were made. And then you find out that in the 50s, they did actually detonate a nuclear device in the ionosphere, and the effects of it sort of hung around for 15 to 20 years. And you think, where does the thinking come that says, you know, it's a good idea to blow up the bomb up in the ionosphere where you got a plasma fusion reaction going on, but at the time they didn't think anything was happening up there. So it's
They found out something was.
Oh yeah, I mean, you think about the experiment, and you know, there was half the team said you shouldn't do it, the other half were all for it, and of course you're in the Cold War, of course, and you've got to find out one way or the other, and then so you detonate the device, and the whole of Hawaii just decides it's going to shut down electrically, and
well, only a minor error. It's a good job they didn't blow away the ionosphere when they discovered the.
What it shows me is that how resilient the environment is in absorbing massive injection. You know, a nuclear bomb might be, you know, lots of energy, but compared to what's coming off the sun smacking into the Earth, it's probably nothing, really. So, you know, it's a pretty stable environment, all said and done.
Yeah, I think so. On our time scale, anyway. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, when you look at the actual precariousness of our situation, like sat on a floating blob of water flying along at a million miles an hour through.
Well, the way
we're basically just teenagers freewheeling. You know, a beer in one hand, a gun in the other, and the knees are steering the wheel.
That's right,
yeah,
and it's all seat of the pants. It's all seat of the pants. This existence.
Very devil may care.
But I think our life is, you know, get your knife and you're walking along the edge, and the knife will slice you. That's how close to, you know, dead we really are.
Yeah.
You know, if bolide comes in, it's about 6 minutes from the top of the atmosphere to the bottom if it's traveling at 20 kilometers per second. You know, it's got 100 kilometers to run through, and yeah. So it's going to take a while to get down there, and before it gets to the ground, you get zapped.
Oh yeah. Well, as long as we get a kind of a 5 minute kind of preview, I think you know, before the lights go out, I think that'd be a quite keen viewing anyway.
But I think a lot of these stone structures and cans and what they call burial chambers were in fact shelters. You know, you see the sun go flash, and you know from past experience that, you know, it's time to run under the caves, because in less than a day you're going to have rocks falling on your head. I think that's the real reason. And then after those events, you know, settled down a bit, they got turned into burial chambers. But initially, I think they were, you know, how to hide away from what was raining down out of the sky. And those sorts of events would have just decimated anything that was on ground. You know, you would have come out of your little shelter, and all your houses and food and everything else has just been totally trashed.
Well, this hydrologist who I was listening to mentioned that after the ice, when the ice had been sat on top of say the Scotland or the Pennines or wherever it was sat, it would actually ram the water into the rock, at about a 10 kilometre down, and actually massively impregnate the Earth's rocks with water, so that they're actually like 80-70% water. And when the ice lifts off that again, if that pressure's kept underground, but if that aquifer's broken, you'll get water pouring up out of the earth. And I suppose just like the moon makes the water stand up on opposite sides of the planet, substantially by meters. Maybe that sort of effect follows a comet as it goes across.
It'd be interesting to do the electrical charge mechanism. If you knew what the voltage on, the potential difference between the Earth and the Moon is the water lift in proportion to the electrical charge potential between the two bodies. And it leads me to also remember that in parts of the Himalayas or China or somewhere, there is rock on top of ice. In other words, you've had a formation of ice, a sheet of ice, and then so much rock comes down on top that the ice stays as ice, and it's got a mountain on top of it.
Yeah.
How would you build that in traditional geological speculation?
Well, this Andrew Johnson came on the other day, and he said basically, as a hypothesis, that the Earth started off as a big snowball that got dirtier and dirtier. I don't know. It got some charge, got covered in heavy materials, and then got a gas layer at the core, so that you've got a hard crust, then a liquid mantle, and then a gas core. And this is what he's proposing, that periodically the crust splits, and the liquid mantle pours out, and it expands the diameter of the Earth considerably during that process. But each time, that's when the sea comes out as well.
I've got to redo my fission star document, but basically, if you got a transuranic ball that's 4 kilometers in diameter, radius, the neutron emission is going to create shells that are half-life time travel, depending on the speed of the neutrons, out from the structure. So for the Earth, it would get about 5 layers of hydrogen shell, and then it'll slowly turn into boron and other material like aluminium and carbon and a few other things, and you'll get a shell that forms, which is a very strong crystalline structure. And if that's got an electrical charge being expressed on it, it's going to suck, the solar wind down onto the surface of the planet. You're going to build up material, and then the shell then gets a bit, there's another shell outside and so on, and what you get is a shell arrangement with material being deposited with huge cavities that occur between the shells as they develop. And the sort of thing that we're talking about, where an ice mass, like imagine Antarctica being covered with rock, and a higher landmass forms as a result. That structure, when the ice disappears, you're going to get massive caves, and the only question of whether it's going to fail or not in terms of what's on top falling down depends on how the deposit occurs. If it's a hot deposit, the ice is going to melt to some degree, but you're going to get lava sort of tube structures occurring, which can be quite strong, but the rock above it is still bloody hot, and it'll take a lot.
Have you considered this, Robert, in terms of the EZ water, the electrically conditioned zones on water?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a magnetic lab stirrer. I've got a 6-liter container, a 5-liter borosilicate glass, and it's important that you use the correct glass. and I rotate that at 388 revolutions per minute. And it's just ordinary tap water when it comes in. And I'll tell you what, I had the tap water tested, and the water that's been rotated at that frequency for 6 hours tested, and the water quality is double what comes out of the tap.
I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in sorting one of these out, you know, because apparently it can really energize your cells and everything properly.
We've been drinking that water now for a year, and the wife's always had pains, joint pains, and things like that. And the anecdotal evidence is that everybody feels better. And my youngest son, of course, is drinking it. It says, "Oh, if I drink that water, I've got to go and piss all the time." You know, he calls it whatever it's expressing.
Well, it's
but
exactly what you want. You
it's
know,
the living
you're
water.
deionizing your body, aren't you?
Well, you're getting rid of toxins and all the rest of it. So I'd be curious to see what happens. But the thing that I found curious in the videos on it is when you do the magnesium stuff, where you mix it in a barrel and was it? I'm just trying to remember the stuff you use for upset stomachs. Anyway, but for that, the people who were drinking that water after being treating, you know, and all they were doing was stirring it and then letting it settle for 48 hours and then drinking the water, is that the calcium on the teeth started coming back. So you know, your cavities and things like that got changed. And there's a lot of research, the biological impact of the ideas that I'm having, you know, is more like asking dumb questions. And because we had a research group that, you know, had lots of money available to them and all, you know, getting into weird stuff anyway, they started doing a whole series of experiments. And one was, you know, how do things cut? And I suggested a whole variety of cutting tests. And the weird stuff is, you know, when you get a projectile coming through the air, you see the shock waves coming off the V shape.
Yeah.
When you use a cutting tool and you know, firing a plasma or water jet or laser beam into it, that cone structure develops from the point of impact out towards the boundary, the other side of the material that you're cutting. So you get all these weird cut mechanisms. And the other thing I said is that because of the way I was describing how neutron formation and deposition, decay occur in terms of atomic absorption and removal of light, is that not if you have a box, so you have a box, you put a light in it, and you switch it off, and you observe what comes out the walls of the box, you know, because the light just inside just goes instantly dark. Where are all the photons going?
Yeah.
You know, it's not being bounced around; it's being absorbed and transmitted. And the normal expectation, and as described in physics, is that what comes out is at a lower frequency to the light that was inside the box to begin with. But the research group found that they also got frequency increase rather than just frequency decrease. So the physics that everybody's working on was not totally correct. Yeah, you got some light frequency coming out was a decrease, but you had light frequency coming out that was an increase. And if my speculation about how neutron formation and decay occurs, then you're going to have the neutron or the atom trying to get to its lowest constructional energy state. And if that means chucking out a low frequency photon, then it'll do that. Otherwise, it'll chuck out a high frequency light photon, because what it's trying to get is an overall constructional low energy arrangement, which is what I think the environment does. You know, you're trying to get to this neutral, balanced structure that your environment will permit. So if you're in a, you know, the Earth is at one potential voltage, the moon's at a different, and anything in between is going to try and, you know, live in that potential difference environment in the, you know, the most balanced mechanism it can achieve.
Yeah,
So,
I think so. I think so.
now
Now it's interesting what Ramon was saying again about the probably the change of the moon phases that has this effect on the human psyche.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
and I
Sort
think
of a sloshing effect, apparently.
I think there's got to be
well, I think it's dead right
yeah,
because there.
I do as well, because I can actually feel I think I can feel the effect of a no moon or a full moon. I kind of seem to know when it's happening without, if it's been cloudy for a week, you know.
Yeah, don't
I
need
can
to look at
feel
the
it.
sky to find out. But Ramon's talked about when he does meditation with magnets, and I'm sure Ramon will have tripped over some documentary stuff where they were trying to get brain control of computers. And part of some of their early experiences, they'd get a magnetic field generator. And the video I saw, this was on a TV documentary, was that they got the person, they ran him through a series of videos that said, is this behavior an evil behavior or a good behavior? And they'd go and score the behavior, and then they'd run the magnet around, this electromagnet around their head and get them to redo the test. And what happened in the result is that the determination of whether an action was good or evil changed. So evil acts, became more agreeable. And there's a statistical, bias towards going evil depending on the magnetic environment. And every time they say, the full moon comes around and everybody goes nuts and women give birth to babies and all the rest of it. Well, if the electromagnetic field structure is being mucked around with between the potential difference of the Earth and the Moon, you're going to have a magnetic potential difference developing as well. That changes the environment that the brains are working in, and they go a little bit loopy.
Don't forget that these circuits, these CDN networks, are physical. They're not copper wires, so they're being squeezed. They're undergoing peristalsis, so they have like a slow moving wave of fluid. The ions are being moved. Plus, then there's the more rapidly moving ion channels in the nerves and the dendrites. And so all of it is there's these different resonating frequencies, and they're interacting, and then those are interacting with the change of environment outside. And because of that, it creates a difference.
The sun and the planets and everything. So,
right. So the way the body is interacting with those changing fields, when you're in, well, certainly when you're in a transcendental state, but even if you're in just a normal state, you can develop the ability to sense those changes ahead of time and then make predictions about what kind of Monday you're going to have, or what kind of what kind of middle of the week you're going to have. Is the next weekend, is it good to so the date selection science becomes possibly real science. I never try to do date selection well ahead of time, but I do try to predict whether or not it would be a good idea to go hiking the following weekend based on the current pump, the normal alternation of yin and yang caused by the sun's rotation, and then the pump that I'm feeling through the body. So I'm using the body as an antenna instead of just always being feeling like squeezed. I notice what most people do is when they feel the squeeze, then they just go inward. They watch a lot of Netflix or whatever. And ideally, they would actually go out and exercise at that time. And then they would feel great. But I mean, it is what it is. If you're feeling depressed and you eat a chocolate, unfortunately, the sugar side of that is going to suppress. It's going to provide a bunch of ions that slow down the CDNs, but the caffeine side of the chocolate is going to stimulate the channel. So it opens up the brain. You feel a little bit better about your life. You feel a little bit better about yourself. But that is a reaction to the event. It would be better if you had the chocolate just before the wave reached its crest.
Well, the question I've got here is biorhythms. How much of that your biorhythm cycle is actually due to the electromagnetic field construct of the solar system itself, and probably a bit further away, because these fields, 3/4 the distance to Alpha Centauri, effectively. So they're big structures, and if there's anything that changes, then there's going to be an impact here in our actual physical bodies. So the question I have is, the biorhythm stuff, is that a an electromagnetic resonance response to the environment, given that the environment is being pulsed and in a cyclical manner. You've got all sorts of cycles of resonance occurring. And because we're living in that environment and we're responsive in electromagnetics to it, we're going to go through these cycles. Like for the last week, from the full moon to probably yesterday, I've been feeling, out of sorts, feeling depressed and wondering why. But it would make sense in terms of the changing electromagnetic environment.
Well, Rudolf Steiner absolutely believes this. I mean, he'll tell you what plants to plant at what time of the month according to the lunar conditions and the solar ones. He fully observes the influence of not just the sun and the moon, but also Jupiter and a couple of the other planets. And he can give very good reasons why this is the case as well. Rudolf Steiner, he does it from a very metaphysical point of view. He just does it from a spiritual point of view. He looks at everything from that point of view. But he can really define these cycles, and they are electrical or magnetic, like as you said, or energetic somehow anyway.
Electromagnetic. I can't separate those two features from each other. They're independent of and simultaneous with each other. But if you have to move a tree or a plant that's in the ground, or even a pot plant for that, mark on the pot plant the direction of north and make sure that when you move the plant that you're still aligned in the northward direction, because plants do not like being turned.
No.
Because their magnetic field structure and their electrical field structure is earth aligned. And if you move the plant and you don't keep that alignment in place, the plant, goes through a fast stage where it just, degrades, and maybe it'll recover, but it certainly gets a tough time of it. And then you've got insects that, there's been research done in Germany and other places where bees in particular, they put a mobile phone in the beehive and the bees go absolutely ballistic. They go nuts. They'll attack anything.
Oh, yeah.
Beehive that was put near one of these phone towers, and the colony basically, degraded. And
fellas, I've got a roll. I'm gonna hit the stop recording, but you guys feel free to keep going. But I got a roll.
Okay, we'll catch you later.
Okay, Ramon.
So,
Ramon.
and